And now we're here to talk more about the convention. Political strategist Pat Brady is here. You've been driving back and forth. This is day one. You're going back there this afternoon. A lot has happened since you and I last spoke. A lot happened over the weekend. I want to get the mood of the convention. What's the feeling in there right now at the RNC?
That they got a winner. I think that they sense that former President Trump is the likely winner of this race, and they're very excited about him. They're very excited about having him back, and they're pretty jacked up.
Well, let's talk about this because let's talk about unity, because that's the big word that's coming out from both the Democrats and the Republicans right now. And I want to bring up something because you have made it very clear in the past that you're not a Donald Trump fan, but you are a Republican, and we're talking about unity here. How does this impact the more moderate Republicans, such as yourself? There's a new VP that has been picked. How is that feeling now? Is everybody coming together?
You get the feeling like that up there in the convention hall, but those are the people that are the hardcore Trump activists. J.D. Vance, the pick for VP, I'm not sure if that broadens the field too much. Just because he's a mini-me Trump, pretty much lined up with Trump on all the issues. And so I'm not sure if that broadens the field. But Trump has definitely unified the people that are supporting him. Now, the events over the weekend, I thought maybe would broaden the field a little bit. The assassination attempt, but the early polling says he didn't get much of a bump out of it, which just kind of surprises me. That's why I think tonight Nikki Haley's speech is going to be critical, because she controls that 10 or 15% of the people like me that aren't big Trump fans and would like to see somebody with a different temperament and approach. So it'll be interesting to see what she says tonight, and how forcefully she defends the former president, particularly in foreign policy, which is her area of expertise, where she doesn't agree with Donald Trump on anything.
So let's talk about Nikki Haley as a pick. There are a lot of Republicans who are staying at home. They're not going to the RNC because they don't necessarily agree with the platform that the Trump administration has taken and plans to take. This could be a major moment then this evening with Nikki Haley.
I think it's a critical moment on just exactly what she says and how she says it. Now, she's a good Republican. She plays ball, and I don't blame her for that. But it depends. She's going to have to dance around like Ukraine and some of the other. Trump wants to pull out of NATO. Trump doesn't want to support Ukraine. Trump has a different view of China and Taiwan, and I think Nikki Haley does. So I think it's going to be critical the way she phrases that. Hey, he is these things that aren't typically Republican positions. She's more the typical Republican. Why you should support him. I mean, she's very capable, so she'll do a good job, but it's going to be interesting.
So they had a Teamster leader speaking yesterday. They've had a lot of minorities. Yep. Let's talk about the significance of that.
Well, they're trying to show that they have a broader appeal than just MAGA world, but if you sit in that room, it's a bit cultish to sit in there. It's not like some of the conventions I've been to before, and that's what MAGA is all about. And I'm not saying that critically, but it really is a cult of kind of personality. They love Donald Trump because the issues they were talking about are not traditional Republican issues. But that being said, at least they're talking about issues that people care about. Inflation, immigration, crime tonight, making America wealthy again, which was the theme of last night. I still to this day don't know what the Democrats' message is. Okay,
well, let's talk about Thursday, the big night. Donald Trump is supposed to speak. He has already said he threw out his previous speech because of the assassination attempt. What do you expect we're going to hear?
Well, he said he threw out his previous speech because he was going to go after Biden like he always does in his campaign speeches, actually what he was doing right before he got hit with the bullet, which was just a horrible thing to see. But I think there is some risk here for him. The people in that hall and the people that have supported him over the last 10 years support him because he's an attack dog. They don't support him because he's a kumbaya guy, right? So if he goes too far to that direction, meaning doesn't sound tough, and that's been the whole theme of the convention, I think there's a risk to him. I think he's got to be Donald Trump if he really wants to keep firing up the people that are going to turn out and vote for him, because that's going to be, I think, the difference in this race. The Republicans are highly motivated to get out and vote for Donald Trump, and the Democrats right now have a candidate that they simply, I don't think, have a lot of faith in. I mean, they got to figure out what to do here, or Donald Trump could win this thing in a landslide. Okay,
what are you hoping to see as the week continues and progresses? What are you looking forward to, or what are you expecting?
Tonight will be a big, big night. And if Carrie Lake, I think Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, all the younger people in the party. So I'd like to see all of them perform. Well, Carrie Lake's a joke. She's going to actually end up losing, I think, that Arizona Senate race. But the rest of them, I think, are legitimate long-term players in the Republican Party. And then next Wednesday, you're going to hear from J.D. Vance, who's a very smart guy. He'll give a good speech. Then we're going to have a speech by the former president. I went back and watched the speech in 2016, and Trump been known as a disciplined speaker, but he gave a pretty good speech. And his campaign is so much better around this time than it was in 16. I think it'll be pretty good, but it's definitely a Trump love fest. And if you're a Republican, you got to be feeling pretty good because Democrats are in a mess right now.
Okay, well, always a pleasure to talk to you. Maybe you'll come back on Friday after the weekend. I'd love to.
Yeah, it's going to be.
overall.
Yeah, tune in. It's going to be fun.
Okay, thanks so much, Pat. Always good to have you.